51.8 yards per game. That's the lowest yards since 2017. 67.8% catch rate. Previous 5-year average was at 74%. So we're talking about a 6% dip. What are we seeing here from Tyler Lockett?
The competition in the squeeze for targets is real, man.
Look at the release.
There's your separation.
Great route.
Stutter and go. Gets by clean.
That is unbelievable.
Maybe the greatest catch I've ever seen.
A little bit older now, 31 years old. We're talking about Tyler Lockett. Let me set the stage here because certainly I think it's fair to say that he's struggling, right? 51.8 yards per game. That's the lowest yards since 2017. 67.8% catch rate. That previous 5-year average was at 74%. So we're talking about a 6% dip there in his catch rate. I'll ask you this, Matt. Is it simply a competition for targets now that they've injected JSN into the mix? Is it slightly lesser quarterback play from Geno this year versus last year? Or is it age that is potentially creeping up here? Or maybe just a little combination of all three? What are we seeing here from Tyler Lockett?
Yeah, I think maybe a combination of all three, but I don't think he looks that different from, like the normal versions we've seen in Tyler Lockett. And look, like, let's be clear about the Thursday night performance. There's a couple of like game-changing plays that had they happened, we're probably not having this conversation about Tyler Lockett, especially notably like the play that like he gets his head around and Geno's got the ball already on him and he doesn't catch. I mean, he should make that catch, but like, that came on him like very fast and everything. So if he catches that, maybe we're not having this conversation. Certainly like, man, because I charted that game this morning and part of me was like, maybe he looks a little slower than before, but like the play that he drew the long PI, I mean, he's screaming open on a post route behind everybody. From this game, 70% success rate versus man. Obviously, that's lower than some of his highlight scores, but it's not. It's nothing that I'd be like, oh boy, I'm raised. Like the Cooper Kupp conversation we had a while ago. Like that's an alarm bell thing in a 1 or 2 game sample size. We're not looking at that with Tyler Lockett so far. Like I think he still looks like a very solid player. He's 31 years old. If he is slowing down from a speed perspective, that's not totally outrageous to see. I mean, he's coming off his best season last year in success rate versus man. I always say, and I gave this warning a lot with like Keenan Allen and DeAndre Hopkins in the offseason. Right. I'm very hesitant to like try to predict age cliffs for guys because sometimes they're playing through injuries and they're fine. Other times like they're great the year before, these older players, and then you see them on the field after an off season and they don't look the same. So I'm always kind of try to be careful about that with the older guys, the guys entering their 30s. I think Lockett still looks fine. I think this offense has not been a good offense for a lot of the year. I mean, number one, they have not had like their starting 5 until from week 1 until I think last Thursday, right? They finally got I believe they got Abe Lucas back. And that's been an issue for them. Geno, I don't think has played flawless quarterbacking, but man, he's still really good when he's on. He was so good against the Cowboys. And then lastly, the competition in the squeeze for targets is real, man, because this is just not a team that's going to air the ball out, that's going to throw the ball a ton. And they're not, it's not even they're a ground and pound team or anything. They just don't play super fast. They don't run a lot of plays. 3 guys that you need to get the ball to 6 times per game, bare minimum 6 times per game. You're hoping for obviously a little bit more for 1 or 2 of those guys. It's difficult, man. And then you get games where somebody's going to get squeezed out. Lockett's been squeezed out. At times, Metcalf has been squeezed out. Sometimes JSN has been squeezed out. I will say the one thing I feel pretty strongly about coming out of Thursday, though, is like, man, JSN ran some great routes against the Cowboys. So that was encouraging to see.
I wonder if it's also those 50-50 balls that are never 50-50 for Tyler Lockett in his career all of a sudden seem a lot more 50-50-ish, That's the visually, that's, I think what I took away from watching Tyler Lockett this year. So I went to go look this up. Per Next Gen Stats, in tight windows, he has a negative 4.7 EPA, and that's the second lowest EPA in his career when we're talking about tight window throws. It is just another contextual note for Tyler Lockett that it always felt like those 50-50 balls were never 50-50 when it went to Tyler Lockett. Like, this guy was coming down with it 70% of the time because he's just so good at tracking that ball and watching the ball come right into his hands, right? Great hands, great body control, great timing of his jumps and just all of that kind of stuff, man, when you're talking about trying to go get that ball. I feel like this year just a little bit off. This year, and I think that is reflected a little bit in the numbers too.
And so many times when we have these guys have these slow periods or even like entire slow seasons, it comes out at some point like, oh yeah, they were just playing through injury throughout it. And like, don't forget that Tyler Lockett from like week 7 to 12, I think actually maybe even at different points still like has been questionable with the hamstring injury. When you're 31 years old and you're like a quickness, a route running, a separation, a speed-based receiver, right? That's going to hinder you a little bit, even in like the in the air and like the contested catch game. If you can't plant and leap or time the jumps and stuff, it's gonna throw you off, and you're gonna get kind of marginalized in the game plan too. That's where it can be reflected sometimes. Is like, okay, well, we know we don't have 100% Tyler Lockett right now. We really need to get JSN going. We really need to get like him the ball intentionally. And that's one thing that I would say is very different from the Seahawks early in the season. It's been, you can tell that they are trying to get JSN the ball, not like at times early in the season, it was like, we're going to get him on these like kind of Mickey Mouse routes. We're going to get him like almost like Rondale Moore-ish. Second time he's come up in the show, but like Rondale Moore type of ways. But now they're like really trying to get him on those intermediate routes or having him run. I mean, that one curl route he ran against Deron Bland was amazing. Like that shows a difference of like, all right, we know that Lockett's kind of trending down a little bit right now, at least with this injury currently. Maybe we're trying to get JSN more involved or DK more involved and stuff like that. The future for Lockett is interesting because he's definitely older. They could potentially get out of his contract, but I still think he's going to play a really important role for this team. Maybe rest of season as their playoff odds don't look great right now. I think they're sub 30% in the NFC. The Rams are ahead of them. The Packers are ahead of them. Even I think the Vikings too. Yeah, the Vikings have better playoff odds right now than the Seattle Seahawks. So they got to get on a roll here. They need all three of these receivers to ball out and Geno to ball out rest of season.
Yeah, you heard Matt talk about Tyler Lockett posting great numbers last year. I just want to share that with the listeners out there. Okay, so in 2022, Tyler Lockett, 78.9% success rate versus man. That was the third highest man score in 2022. And then again, against zone, 83.4% success rate versus zone. That was the 8th best in the NFL among all charted wide receivers for Tyler Lockett last year. Listen, how rare are some of these numbers? Okay. In terms of guys who are, again, over 78% success rate versus man and over 80% success rate versus zone. The list is short, ladies and gentlemen. It's Stephon Diggs, Justin Jefferson, A.J. Brown, Devontae Adams, and Tyler frickin' Lockett. That's how good and that's how well he measures out, according to the metrics provided by Matt Harmon and Reception Perception. I'll be interested to see, Matt, when the charting numbers come out at the end of the year, where he kind of sort of ranks, because again, just from a visual standpoint, it certainly doesn't seem as explosive as it was certainly in 2022.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say he could be a slightly declining player. I don't think he's like about to hit the cliff and he's done.
Yeah.
But look, he at this point in his career, he could, the best days of Lockett could certainly be behind him. It's tough for me to imagine he's not on this roster next year and stuff like that, where I think a lot of the like dynasty bros really want JSN to get rolling here. Man, he's just such an important player for them. He's been so clutch. And you'd think that, like, all right, if they don't make the playoffs this year, they really need to lean into this offensive identity even more so heavily next year. And they need, like, you can't get rid of Lockett because then it's like, all right, well, you know what becomes a massive need for you then? Receiver.